Okay. All right, I'm Sage Cole, and I'm the first lecturer this morning. It is Thursday, August 1st at the Freiburg New Church Assembly. And this is the second part of my lecture series on be love, be honest, be useful. So on Tuesday, we talked about love as the first thing. If we don't have love, we're nothing. We have to start with love and community. And but there's another part to love that's very important, that's also equally important. And we talked about how love, wisdom, and usefulness must be combined. And so the second part is wisdom or truth. And I like to frame wisdom or truth when I think about it as an active thing, as honesty. Because if you say like be truth or be wisdom, it's a little bit, I think that's when we get into sort of highfalutin tootin' ideas about what truth and honesty, or truth and wisdom are. But a much more intimate way to think about our relationship to truth is to think about our ability to be honest. So to start our lecture today, I will just start by being honest with you. I haven't slept so well this week. I don't know how the rest of you guys are faring with your sleep away from home. And I'm glad to be here. As I've shared with people when they ask how I am, my soul is very well. And at the same time, my external body, the part of me that worries about my safety and survival, is not so great. We just went and saw Inside Out 2 yesterday. Have any of you seen the Inside Out 2? That anxiety spiral, that is going on for me right now. As some of you know, I lost my job at the Swedenborg Chapel in June. So I'm not sure about my physical well-being at the moment, but my spiritual well-being is steady. And I share that by way of honesty, but I also share that as an invitation to think about kind of, I see some symmetry between my own experience and some of what's happening in the larger world. I think a lot of people are really growing on the planet. I don't know, is anyone else growing? Is anyone else being challenged, opening a little bit, growing up, coming to understand themselves a little more deeply? It feels to me like that's happening right now. That a lot of people are maybe regenerating, like Swedenborg said was going to happen. People are growing. And at the same time that people are growing and coming to know themselves more deeply, there's sometimes often a clashing between our growing and our coming to know ourselves and then the state of the world that we live in. And there aren't always, it's not always seamless for those who are growing and coming to know themselves to figure out where they fit in the external world. And we see this as our institutions are not always meeting the moment. You know, do the political parties that exist right now kind of fully embody our sense of what's true and good? No. And our churches are not always filled to the brim and holding the fullness of our humanity in the same way. A lot of our institutions are not meeting the moment. So I name that because it's one of the ways I hold my own anxiety, that I am not alone in this moment of not knowing where I fit or how my physical needs will be met in this world that we live in. And that I haven't failed somehow, and if I was doing it right, it would all make sense. None of us have failed, but our systems are failing, and they need to be made new. And in my estimation, honesty is one of the really important parts of how that making new process is going to happen. Love is essential. We have to start from love. And I don't know, honesty feels like the part that sort of we all know we want to love each other. We all know that's important. But do we want to be honest with each other? I wonder how you feel about that. And we named it already in the chapel service. We lie for what we believe to be good reasons. So we can look good, so we can feel okay about ourselves, so we can protect others. What's the benefit of being honest? And how do we create spaces where honesty is encouraged? these are some of the questions I want us to hold together this morning. And maybe before we jump to the first slide, I wonder, and Suzanne has the mic if you're willing to share, what comes up for you when I suggest be honest? If anyone's either willing to share an environment where they feel like honesty really does thrive, I'd love to hear the positive. But then also if you're able to name, like, these are the reasons I would not be honest in a situation. Anyone willing to throw out there the challenges and the opportunities of honesty?
I'm part of a crew of volunteers that bring food to our town, and there's not a lot of love, but there is an awful lot of honesty because we're dealing with each other, and anyways, that's what I feel.
Mm-hmm. So being together and doing work helps you to be more honest?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure. Maybe we're not ready to be honest yet. That's okay. Go ahead, Ken.
In therapy,
Yeah.
that's a place where people are honest, and I think it's easier because a client knows that they're cared about.
Yeah.
And that should be true.
Yeah.
It's a safe environment to be honest. And it's a real privilege to have someone share their honesty with you. And I feel like the fear of being honest is often unwarranted. Like, people are often more generous, more forgiving, more open, and can relate to the problems than we think they can.
Nice. That's great. Dave.
Dave Keating. I hear with honesty and sharing, and it makes me think, often I think of honesty as not lying, because sometimes sharing is not a good thing to do, and it cannot be helpful, or it may overload people, and sometimes it's best to be silent rather than gushing out everything. As you said earlier, not hurting other people is important.
Yeah.
But so often, is it? Do you think not lying?
Yeah. I think on some level, because you can be silent and not lying, and that's still honest. So honesty doesn't have to mean we tell everybody and probably in some ways we don't want to live in a world where we're all, and we sort of are starting to live in that world, aren't we, on the internet, where we're hearing everything about everybody's opinion. One of the definitions of honesty that I find very valuable is when I speak about honesty in relationship to vulnerability and not honesty in relationship to candor. We're really into candor right now on the internet, right? Let me tell you what I think about this. And we're very good at sharing our opinions about things, which to me is not a sacred act. But when we're honest in relationship to our vulnerability, this is what I'm experiencing in myself right now. That is a sacred act. And as Kent has mentioned, a lot of us now in the world go to therapy, and that's where we have that relationship where we feel safe enough because we know this person isn't going to tell anybody. We trust that it's okay for them to give us their time because we've paid them, so we can feel okay about taking their time. I think with ministers, I certainly feel like one of the best parts about being a minister is having had opportunities to be with people when they are honest, and many people choose to go to ministers for that honesty. And I think one of the questions I hold is, what would it take for us to bring more of that honesty to each other? Why do I get to be the only one who hears what's really true? And how much honesty in community can forge bonds of creativity and relationship that could potentially bring about this new world we all long for. So, okay, one more and then we'll go to the slides.
I just want to say, when you said the word vulnerability, it reminded me that as I'm getting older, I'm losing some capacities. There's some things that, and I'll just give you the story. It's very simple. I left your sister's credit card at a car dealership one time, and I said, no, don't tell anybody, because I had to drive all the way back and get it. And I felt really embarrassed about it and vulnerable about it. And then I realized, no, if my family doesn't know when I'm slipping, I'm not going to be honest with them, and I need to let them see what kind of help I need.
Yeah, right. We can't receive help. There's so many things that can't happen when honesty is not present. Yeah. Well, let's go to the first slide, Christina, or the second slide. So this is what I read in chapel this morning. For there is nothing hidden that will not be manifested. Neither has anything been kept secret except that it should come abroad. And I mentioned this last year in my lecture, but I'm becoming kind of a one-trick pony. But the next slide, Christina. That quote is what George Dole uses, our beloved George Dole, in the last publication that he offered in the summer of 2021 in our beloved Messenger. He submitted it, as I think some of you know, just several weeks before he died. And I think I told you all to read it last year. I don't know if you did. So I'm going to talk. Several days before he died. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, that means it's something we should listen to. And this article really is about honesty. So these are the first lines of the article. It is safe to say, I believe, that none of us would relish having all our secret thoughts and feelings made public. Strange as it may sound, though, this may be an essentially baseless fear. If only our worst thoughts and feelings were on display, that would be one thing. But if all were out in the open, it would be clear that we ourselves do not like what we are keeping hidden. That obviously is why we do not want others to see it. If they could see the hurt that prompts the resentment or the pain that prompts the fear, they would not be quick to condemn. How does that sit with you? We don't have to have comments, but just thumbs up. Do you think that's true? Are you on the fence? Do you think people are quick to condemn? Yeah. If everything was on the table? Let's go to the next slide, Christina. So then in that same article, he makes this point. In the new church, we are told there will be no external that is separated from its internal. That is, there will be no pretense. There will be no social masks. Now, I wonder if some of you might read that and go, well, that's why the new church is long ways away. I don't want any part of that. I need my social mask. I need protection from this world that can be so harsh so often. And to me, I see this as a deep invitation. That if we are to be a part of this new church, this is the invitation, and perhaps central. There was conversation in discussion group the other day about church, and we were talking actually specific about the Freiburg New Church Assembly and how this is not a church. This is a educational institution, and we were speaking about it in relationship to we don't want to be a church. Let's not be a church. In the world today, as what we name churches are on the decline, we don't want a part of that. Because in the larger world, what it means to be a church is often conformity. We all have to kind of act the same way or behave the same way. But in that conversation, I was a little bit, I know that's a tension for me, is I don't want to be that kind of church, but I really want to be a new church. I've drunk the Kool-Aid, guys. I'm on board with the vision of the new church. And that vision of the new church is very radical. It's perhaps more radical than we've fully come to understand, because it is about this way of living where there is no pretense, where there is this openness. And clearly that way of living can't function within what we have thus far defined as church, if we think of church as kind of only allowing certain behavior or certain ideas. It has to allow kind of the fullness of who we are. And what's going to allow that? What are the forms that we can create that might allow that? I think there's one more in this same. Christina, if you can switch it. So this quote from Heaven and Hell is what George brings in to help us understand how might we be able to live without social masks? Like, what does that take? Does that just mean we have to be totally, vulnerable to everyone on the planet? What is the shift in our thinking that has to occur that would allow us to be more honest? And so this is from Heaven and Hell. Swedenborg writes, if we believed the way things really are, that everything good comes from God and everything evil from hell, then we would not take credit for the good within us or blame for the evil. But since we do not believe in any inflow from heaven or from hell, and therefore believe that everything we think and intend is in us and from us, we make the evil our own and defile the good with the feeling that we deserve it. Mm-hmm. I hope you can hear what a radical reframing this is, and the effect this can potentially have on the way you perceive yourself. And I wonder how many of you, this is how you perceive yourself? Or have you figured this one out and made it a part of your life all the time? Somewhat?
I just want to say something.
Sure.
Someone,
Hold on, get the mic. There you go.
I don't know if it's true or not, but
Yeah.
John Odner told me that this statement is made 7 times in the throughout the writings.
Lovely.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Maybe we should listen. Yeah. This is the profound reframing, in my estimation, of the way that we have thus far been functioning as a species. And one way that I'll invite you to think about it is to think again about kind of the course of our development in relationship to human development and also the Bible. We start out in the Garden of Eden, right, where we're honest, right? We're naked. We're totally ourselves. There's no pretense. But then through the eating of the apple, the knowledge of good and truth, we begin to have shame, and we begin to have this sense of self that needs to be protected and nurtured and managed in some way, right? Then the Israelite journey is all about establishing the rules of life. How are we going to live? And they all become very ingrained external rules of life. And that's kind of the journey we've been on as a species for a long, long time, right? There are certain rules of behavior that each generation teaches the next. And I would suggest that's been an important part of our evolution, right? Because otherwise we would not be wearing clothes, and we would not, there's a lot of skills and ways of behaving that we've developed over the generations by having these external rules. And each of us is kind of a conglomeration, a mix of your particular ancestors' rules of life. And we know now as a species that those rules of life were primarily passed down through the operation of shame, right? This is how you behave, and if you do not behave this way, you are shamed. And we behave these ways so we can stay included in the whole. And while I would say that's all been useful, because we've developed all these incredible ways of being and managing our human experience, we're now coming to a point in our consciousness and awareness where we recognize that that's what's been going on. We've been kind of behaviorally conditioned all of these generations, and many of us are starting to go, I don't want, is this how I want to live? Is this who I really am? And my belief is that process, that journey, is what is moving us towards this vision of the new church that now is this, parallel, this mirror image of the Garden of Eden, where we have the tree of life, but now in the midst of this city that has what? Boundaried walls, filled with jewels and treasures. We're coming to discover how communities have shaped and formed us in our behavior, and now we're getting to sort of wake up to that whole process, look at it, notice it, and then realize we actually have choices about it. And we talked about this in the first lecture, moving from reactivity to responding. Reactivity is our animal instincts. This is what has kept us safe for so long. This is what has helped us to fulfill these boundaried expectations of the community so that we can be included. And yet, this journey has not been just so we would figure out the boundaries that are right and be perfect in it. Some people might suggest that that is the invitation, and that's the force that continues to live in this world that wants to say there is one right community, one right way to be, one powerful leader who will bring us into whatever. But that voice is, while it is still very loud in our world, it's also getting very ridiculous, which is kind of a gift. Because in my estimation, most of the humans on this planet, as we talked at the beginning, are starting to grow up. They're starting to realize that we have this invitation to spiritual freedom within, and that we can start to make choices about what stories we perpetuate. Some call this, we in our Swedenborgian tradition call this the process of regeneration. And we believe we are here to be regenerated, to come into this state of freedom, where we have that regained state of innocence from the Garden of Eden, but now with wisdom and freedom to choose how we will act. From my best guess in the larger world, it's not that regeneration is only happening among Swedenborgians, it's happening all over the planet, and many people call this the healing journey. And we have a lot of, I'm sure all of you are connected to healing modalities and people who are on a healing journey. And in that frame of understanding, that growth process is, again, it's returning us to that seed of innocence from the beginning, that love that is always there, even when it's layered over. And in healing work, there's that understanding that God is doing this, and we can participate by going through this process of healing. And I would suggest that we Swedenborgians have a lot to learn from the communities of people who are doing this healing work. Because so far we know about it, because Swedenborg told us about it, but we really only have the knowing about it. We don't actually have the practice. And that is probably important. But as we come to this deeper freedom, one of the ways we can come to it is through the knowing about it. And this little bit that Swedenborg told us about, that the goodness in us is not our own, but at the same time, the evil in us, the bad, is also not our own. There's a deep freedom in that awareness. And I do think that's another piece of the evolutionary journey. We've been really into being ourselves for a long, developing our identity. Who am I? And that's great. There's been a lot of goodness in kind of all of the creative identities that have emerged over the planet, and it's great that we are, thinking about different ways to be. And there's a limitation to that. If it's who am I? I am all of these things. I am these good things. I am these bad things. I think for me that's the midlife journey. At some point I was like, I don't know that's too much. I don't want to be a person. It's too much to hold all of this identity. And I think a lot of us, that's what the midlife journey is about. That's what that experience of vastation is about. It's okay, yeah, we can have all of these identities, but do they define us? Especially when we realize that eventually on our deathbed, we're going to let so much of that go. So this bit from Swedenborg that we've learned from Amy is in there 7 times, is saying it is flowing through us. All we are vessels of life. And really all we primarily are kind of the ability to say yes and the ability to say no to what's coming in. The ability to see the evil tendencies and go, oh, and go, no, I don't, I'm gonna, and then the ability to say yes to the things that are good. But when and really it is an invitation, I feel like at this point, to start to form ourselves in a new way, not out of shame. Because what happens when we shame ourselves for the bad things we do? In some ways, we stick them in ourselves even more deeply. I'm the worst. And then it becomes even more a part of our identity, and then we lose the ability to do all the good that we might do next if we were able to release that dark moment or that bad thing that we stumbled into. And in many ways, that's been one of the beautiful gifts of Christianity. And, you know, we may have our own questions or judgments about different branches of the church, but in my mind, God is working everywhere all the time, and in many of those with maybe even very fundamentalist views, it's that hitting rock bottom, right? It's sometimes the people that glow the most and have the most kindness and generosity are the ones that have sinned the hardest and have fallen the lowest, and then seen that that was not them, that there was something in them that was deeper than that. And in my mind, that's why, again, why honesty is so important. That is a deeply honest moment when we hit rock bottom and we're able to say, whoa, I don't have this. I can't figure this out. I need to rely on something greater than myself. So let's go to the next slide. So here are just some words about why I believe honesty is the path to wisdom and truth, because I've gotten some pushback around this. People are like, is honesty really truth? I don't know. Truth is bigger than honest. Truth is, I don't know. Well, let's explore it a little bit. So the primary point of wisdom and faith is that we should believe we are nothing in ourselves but everything in God. So that quote from Swedenborg points again to this idea of us being a vessel that comes from some higher source. So wisdom and faith is that having that humility, having that ability to let go of this idea that I am something that holds goodness and holds badness, but instead to see ourselves as humble vessels, that actually it's that humility that makes wisdom and faith possible. Next one, Christina. Truth does not possess life on its own. It only receives life from goodness, and truth receives life from goodness when we live according to it. So again, in our theological understanding, love is what we have to start with. It's the substance of all life, but truth is the forms that it takes. So our honesty, our truth, it's the structure. And it doesn't have life without love, which is perhaps why that's one way to hold. What does it mean to be honest? Are we going to just, tell all of our opinions? There's not a lot of love in just telling all of our opinions about everything. But there is love in a willingness to show up with our imperfection, with what we know or with what we're struggling with. That is going to be a truth that is going to hold some passion in it that will have the ability to make change. Next one. To the extent that we are raised up from outward concerns toward inward ones, we come into the light. The way I understand that quote, and this is part of the state of our world right now. We have a lot of knowledge about the external world, right? We are constantly getting information from the external world, from media, from experts, from influencers. So many people are trying to teach us, how to live and what's right and what's good and what everything means. And that is part of the chaos of this moment too, right? Because what do you trust? This is the conflict of truth right now. There isn't. I don't know. Let me know if there's a website I can go to where I'm only going to get the truth. I haven't found one yet. There's all of this information, incredible scientists and experts giving us information, and yet it's so prevalent. If we're only looking outside to find what's true for us, that's sort of a recipe for a nervous breakdown in my mind. It's our inward, it's when we give attention to our inward concerns that we actually begin to connect with that source of wisdom that we talked about from the beginning, that comes from God, that comes in this influx inside. And the way I think about this a lot, which I think is it's been useful for me is like, I'm interested in the eternal life. Like, I know I'm only here for a little while. So I'm curious about, we deeply believe that this story goes on. So giving our attention to eternal life can help me to think about, okay, yes, I'm really stressed about my cell phone bill and I have to deal with it, but is this the most important thing? Or is there a deeper importance in the way I am speaking to this person who is helping me deal with my cell phone bill? What is the eternal aspect of any given moment? And I don't know, what I'm discovering so far is it's usually quite simple. And it's taking the time in every given moment to be grateful for this life we've been given. To turn, as we talked in the beginning, to turn our loving attention towards the moment, whatever might be happening in it, even if what is happening is suffering and struggle. But being able to have that loving intention versus, how am I going to control this situation? How am I going to manage these externals so that I get the things that I want? I'll be talking tomorrow a lot more about what this turn from the material to the spiritual. Because if we think about this world right now, we have a lot of ways of manipulating our material environment. And we're really interested in that. And a lot of that manipulation is based in lying, right? It's become totally socially acceptable to lie, to advertise, to write reviews on Amazon to make money, not because you actually care about the product. We're so interested in manipulating the external environment to get what we want, to look a certain way, and none of that has anything to do with our spiritual lives. So what does it mean to give our attention to our inward concerns, and how do we create communities that support that? I think we have one or two more. Maybe that's the last one. Absolutely nothing takes root without desire. Truth sown and rooted through a desire for truth lasts, and the desire brings it back to mind. This one from Swedenborg, I feel like I see a lot in the kind of larger spiritual movement world. People recognizing and taking the time to consider, what do I really love? What do I really want out of life? Versus, what does my mother want me to be, or my peers, or what's going to be the thing that's going to get me the most money in life? And there's really a whole movement of people who are like, because our institutions are failing, it's like it's not safer to try to please others. It's actually safer now to really start to discover our passion. And a lot more people, as you discussed last night with Evan and Jen, there's a usefulness in discovering our passion, and people are even finding ways to, feed their families while doing it. And that's, in my mind, a movement towards the holy city. Because we're finding that fulfilling the expectations of others, while perhaps they started in a noble way, have been grounded in serving certain people over others. And so if we're going to be moving into this new church, this holy city, the healing that's required on this planet, in my mind, is going to come through every individual human discovering for themselves what they love, and then being willing to bring it into the world. And that requires a lot of self-honesty, being willing to be honest with ourselves, which often begins with being honest about our own suffering, what we don't like. That's often what we discover first, right? And then being willing to start to believe that there is something of value, of sacred value within each of us that this world needs. Helen Keller was an example of that in a large, and I believe that's why she was a global celebrity at her time, because here's someone who from the external world had very little value. She couldn't see, she couldn't hear. Why would we devote our time to someone with those limitations? And yet, with the key of love, the offering of the gifts of another, basically a human being who had been thrown away by the world, Annie Sullivan, orphan, unlock the key to this incredible, beautiful human being who showed the world that each of us has that in us. And I like to believe that over the last, since she died, the world has become a place that honors more and more the gifts of all human beings. And we certainly have work to do. Is there one more, or is that the end? Okay, last one. I'm going to give James Baldwin the last say. Precisely at the point when you begin to develop a conscience, you must find yourself at war with your society. Perhaps that feels harsh. It feels very true to me. Becoming more conscious, becoming regenerated is not like moving to a land of rainbows and ponies. It's as we become more loving and more honest, we actually welcome in the ability to see more of the hurt of the world, the hurt of our neighbors, and the problems that exist. And sometimes I think, I'm not like the best salesperson for like, join me in this, because we're gonna like look at all the hurt and it'll be so good. Maybe some of you would prefer not to be on that journey, but I think many of us already are. I mean, the hurt is it's pretty hard to hide from at this point, the hurt that exists on our planet. And it's pretty obvious that the processes and the systems that have been in place so far are just not going to meet the moment. They don't have the ability. We can't heal, we can't solve the problems of the world with the same brains that created the problems. We really need a new mind, a new spiritual mind. We need to begin to live from a deeper level that is this invitation to regeneration. And honesty, as much as that may feel a little scary or painful or uncomfortable, in my mind is really the path. Because it's true, right? And we may have highfalutin tootin' ideas about what truth is, but truth is just like what is so. It's like what is actually so right now in this universe, in this room, in yourself. What is ultimately true? And we have a lot of work to do, because a lot of the things that we're being told are true, or we have been told are true, we're starting to realize are not. They're not what's going to help us to survive on this planet together. And I think the solution, or the possibility that exists right now, is not for someone out there to, from the sky with a big bullhorn, tell us, oh, you've been wrong, and here's what the truth is. But to discover that truth within ourselves, and then to be willing to share it with each other. So I'll leave it for that. We have about 10 minutes for comments and questions.
I just want to share that 35 years ago, when I started seminary, and George was one of my teachers, he was trying to explain this concept of how we need to have congruency between inside and out, and that will be what brings us to heaven. And he used as an example, he said, I could have an aneurysm right now and I'd keep on teaching, because he didn't think that it was any different. It would just feel the same. And other thing I wanted to say is that often, we talk about the gifts of free will and rationality, but we have the gift of the privacy of our own mind in this world to work it out, where we won't have that in the spiritual world. So, hey, let's get to work now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I work with a lot of kids, this is Jessie, I work with a lot of kids who recognize sort of these two halves of themselves, like this is the good me, but they label it as part of themselves, like the good me and the bad me, or the, like I'm evil, when they do something. And I just really love I need to find a sort of non-religious way to help them understand that this is not you, and part of it is that we have to be careful with our language and say, you're not a bad kid, you're making some poor choices, but especially the little ones, I just really want to help them understand that this is, this is not you. And I love the freedom that comes from that, just this is not me. I need to just choose which way
Yeah.
I'm going.
It's not you, and you have a choice.
And
Ted and
you
I
choose.
definitely wrestle with this one, because
Yeah.
to just leave them at "you're just good" is like, well, yeah, you got some work to do.
Right.
So
You got some impulses.
You
but-
have to
yeah.
to own our freedom to choose. It's important. Yeah. I think Amy, right behind you.
I would just clarify that as the difference between who we are and our behavior.
Yeah.
You made a bad choice and had bad behavior, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that's who we are. We're not bad people. It's bad behavior,
Right.
and we can choose to have different behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're neither good nor bad.
Yeah. And in connection to that, I think something we can really offer as a church is not only are we not our behavior, but that our feelings can be very different. And inside out, you got to go see it, really good at like all the feelings are important. And I mean, that's partly why I am a Swedenborgian, is the idea of vastation. Like, we haven't failed if we've gone into a vastation. Like, we need to celebrate. That's good. It's good to go through these spiritual struggles, because this is what helps us to grow. So whether we're having sadness or anger or fear, that all of these feelings have a use. And if we can be loving towards them, we can discover that use more easily. Yeah. Anything else? Well, I would just share that, so tomorrow I'm offering my last lecture, and I hope to bring it together to share more practically how I envision this coming forward. And if you're interested, tonight is when I hold our regular Be Loved, Be Honest, Be Useful group, and we'll be doing it as a hybrid here in this room at 7 p.m. So I'd love it if some of you would like to join the group so you can get a sense of what it's like. And this is our regular group, so it's open to any humans on the planet, which maybe is a little too open. I think at this point I'm sort of really open to hearing from different types of people. So this is a super open group, but my vision or my hope for this is that we would form Be Loved, Be Honest, Be Useful groups in different communities, at different churches, and perhaps around different themes. Because obviously, we're not meant to be honest with every human on the planet. Like, we need to find communities of people where we feel safe and where we can really co-create. Because I think there's a usefulness in this kind of gathering in relationship to just our own personal regeneration. We already know it's useful to connect into what we're experiencing just for our own personal growth. But ultimately, my hope is that this format could birth new opportunities, as we together kind of think about how we're called and what we love, to create new forms of community that could be all over the map, could be all kinds of different things, because I think church can be a lot of things that we have yet to imagine. So, thank you for your time, and I hope you'll come tonight.